Agenda item 5 is the adoption of Warrington Local Plan 2021-22 to 2038-39. I'll come to Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the work on the local plan started many years before I took over this portfolio. And during that time, there's been a significant number of consultation events with the public and with other stakeholders. We eventually came to a place where we were okay with the plan to come to full council, and the full council resolved to then send it to the Secretary of State for further examination. And those examinations, so that happened in April 2022. And then from April 2022 all the way through to July this year, there have been a number of different consultation events with stakeholders led by those inspectors. We then received the inspector's report, which sets out a number of modifications to the plan. And those modifications are in the bundle of documents, the sort of 400-page bundle of appendices, which I'm not going to go through them all, otherwise we'll be here all night. But just wanted to sort of highlight some of the things that we are amending in the plan. So just to summarise, we've always said that the plan is not necessarily is not a politically ideologically driven exercise. This plan was developed in consultation with the public. It was developed in consultation with stakeholders, and we used our excellent officer corps to follow the guidelines, to follow the framework that the government has set out for local authorities when developing local plans. The inspectors agreed with our assessment of how many homes are needed. So that comes to 14,688 new homes will be needed in Warrington during the plan period. The inspectors regarded our assessment of employment land needs to be high, so they've reduced that down to 168 hectares. And the main difference there is that the South East Warrington employment area has been taken out of the plan. There is concern voiced by certain quarters about building on greenbelt land. And I have to stress here that the plan, when developing a plan, we identify areas that could be developed. But those areas are identified are brought to the council attention by the people who own the land. And a lot of the land that's come forward belongs to private developers or even the government themselves. Very little of the residential areas that we're proposing to build on belongs to the council, if any at all. We've always strived to minimise the amount of homes being built on greenbelt land. And you'll see in the report that actually the number of homes being proposed to be built on greenbelt land is going down. I know there's been some criticism in the press saying, why don't we build on Fiddler's Ferry and things like that? When we first started this process, Fiddler's Ferry was not it hadn't been decommissioned, and it's not council land. So it was only when the power station was being decommissioned and the owners of that land came and said, we'd like to develop it, could we then consider it for our needs? But to be clear, part of the land of Fiddler's Ferry is also greenbelt land. So when people criticise the council for building on greenbelt land and not building on Fiddler's Ferry, they probably don't realise that actually part of Fiddler's Ferry is actually greenbelt. So it's a false argument. I appreciate people think Warrington is developing far in excess of what they would like. And I made this point at one of my first speeches when I took over this portfolio, that the history of Warrington back in the 1970s, when the government and planners were envisaging what was the future of Warrington, they always envisaged Warrington to have a population in excess of 200,000 by around 2020, I think it was. So we are doing nothing different to what was originally envisaged for the town. But we are conscious that we don't want to overdevelop the town, and you'll see in the report that we have actually also worked in partnership with local authorities in the neighbouring area. So, for example, St Helens, where part of their employment land development in the borough of St Helens will count towards our employment needs as well. The last thing I'd sort of just remind members about is why we need to have a local plan, and I really urge our members at the full council to reflect on this, because a local plan, we don't have an up-to-date local plan in place at the moment, but an up-to-date local plan is the main way local authorities can set their own local planning policies. We might have planning policies in place. They may be expired, and once they are expired, they can still be reflected on, and you can still take some heed to those. But when it comes to making a planning application, they don't carry the same weight as a planning policy that is up to date and in force. And without having an up-to-date plan, then Warrington Borough Council will be significantly hampered in our ability to prevent inappropriate or damaging development within our borough. So the recommendations are set out at the end of the report. And just to summarise, we're recommending the Cabinet approves the main modifications, the minor modifications, the revised plan, and also that the plan goes to full council for their consideration. But in the meantime, if anything comes up, that could be classed as a minor modification, which doesn't change the substance of the plan, then those can be signed off by the relevant director in consultation with myself. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel. Has anybody got any questions or comments they wish to make? Okay. Well, firstly, thank you to Councillor Patel. I think I've always been clear that developing a local plan is one of the hardest things that a local authority does, because it's trying to tread that fine line between the demands and desires of developers and the views of local people. And, you know, growth, development, increasing development of the town, you know, does bring with it challenges, because residents do have views about the town and the direction it's going in. And that's why I think some of the points you made are really important in terms of a demonstrable need for housing to support the needs of Warrington residents, you know, and that's clearly been agreed by the inspector. And then other aspects around the local plan, what it is there to achieve, are really important, because we take our responsibility as a planning authority very seriously. We do need to ensure that here in Warrington we have control of the planning process and development, and too often that becomes a point of criticism or conflict for the council in terms of planning law and the way that's implemented. But you know, planning is a complex task, and you know, what we need to do is ensure that we remain the planning authority, that we take that responsibility seriously, and we ensure that development for the town is appropriate and meets the needs of local people and local businesses. And so I know, Councillor Patel, you said you hadn't had this portfolio responsibility for particularly long. And certainly the history of the local plan goes back a number of years. It goes back to when Terry O'Neill was leader of this council. And that just shows how long and drawn out a local plan process is. But I thank you for your efforts and your presentation. I think the overall pack of information is, absolutely comprehensive. So I certainly want to thank and commend the officers for the input that they've had to that and the guidance they've given to us as a cabinet throughout in terms of policy about meeting the requirements of government and ensuring that we follow, the process to the letter to develop a coherent and cohesive local plan in the way that we have done. So have I got a seconder for this report? Councillor McLaughlin, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous.